Hey everyone, Zach Wright, founder of Grapevine Software. Welcome back to another episode of the Future of Work Weekly Report. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for supporting the channel and continuing to learn about the future of work, because you are one of the pioneers that we want to support during this transition in making work better. And if you are first timer here, what the Future of Work Weekly Report is where we discuss the hottest headlines and the trending topics happening in the future of work. So anything from flexible work, remote work, hybrid work, AI, productivity, you name it, that's where we're going to focus here today. And the way that we go about that is we take articles that are happening in today's time. So typically that week, at the latest, it could be the prior week, but then we break down the different highlights within the articles while also sharing those in the description. So if that is something that you're interested in, then you're in the right place. First, go ahead and like and subscribe so we can continue to get up in the algorithm and get out to more people where we can continue to build that coalition of future of work pioneers and transition into a better working world for everyone. All right. Without further ado, we are going to go ahead and start with article number one. We have two articles this episode, so stay tuned for the second one as well. The first article is coming from HR Drive. We've used them before in previous episodes, and we've really become fond of their writing and the information that they're sharing with the world. So this article was published May 13th, 2024. So it was Monday of this week. And the title is Vast Majority of Gen Z Tech Workers Say They'd Consider New Career Opportunities. And we're going to dive into that, starting with highlight number one. So highlight number one for this article is high dissatisfaction among Gen Z tech workers. And what they call out here is that about 90% of Gen Z tech workers under the age of 25 in North America would consider new career opportunities in 2024. I'm assuming that that means that they would leave the position that they're at to go into another career opportunity. But even more staggering is that only 13% express satisfaction in their current role. And that's important because if we think about the tech community, the tech environment that we've seen over the past 20 years, for the majority, and you can quote me on this, the majority of satisfied workers were most likely in the tech industry because they had a lot of growth opportunities. They had a lot of stability. They had a lot of culture-oriented focus. And so I think Ryan McCohen, president of Lorien in North America, was quoted, and he says it best here: our data should be a wake-up call for tech employers because it shows a concerning level of dissatisfaction among permanent and contractor talent. And what we really need to look at here is, what are the reasons behind the lower satisfaction rates, the increased willingness to change careers or take a new career opportunity? Is it culture? Is it growth opportunities? Is it lack of stability? Is it the tech layoffs? There's a lot of things that come into factor. And so to kind of dig into this just a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and go into highlight number two, which is motivations for job change. And so I think what they're talking about here is the motivations for changing the job, in why would they want to change the job, or what are the factors that really go into changing jobs here. So the first statistic here is 24% of North American tech workers seek new opportunities to learn new technologies. So with AI increasing, you can imagine that if you're a tech person who is very innovative and an early adopter, and you're in an industry that doesn't progress with the times, so maybe they're not using that technology, you might want to shift your industry, your position, your career, into going into something more innovative, more risk taking in a sense. So that's number one for a motivation for change. And then two is 17% desire career progression. And so, again, we're talking about Gen Zers here, right? So the way that we have to think about this is, are we providing employees the right type of growth opportunities to match the needs of the employee? And this goes back to Hackman and Oldham's job characteristic model that I often quote, where you have growth need strength. And what that really means is that an employee in your organization has a desire to grow in this area. It could be anything, right? It could be into management. It could be into team lead. It could be into a better engineer. It could be into a HR role. Whatever the case is, what you want to make sure as an organization is, one, you know what that employee is motivated by, you know what their growth expectations are, and you allow the employee to work from A to B in getting to that career progression. Because if they don't, or if you don't allow that as an organization, you're going to see that employee over time leave. And what we know with Gen Zers and younger millennials is that they're doing a lot of things that we probably should have done in the past, which is speak up whenever we're not being heard, or speak up whenever we're not getting that promotion that was promised to us 6 months ago. And then you bring it up again and they get irritated with it, right? So we need to make sure as organizations, especially remote and hybrid, that we're very intentional whenever it comes to employee career development, right? And one of the ways that we can do this is, as I mentioned, talk to your employees, right? I don't know why that has to be said, but talk to your employees and really understand who they are. And I don't mean in a generalized sense. What I mean is, whenever you're talking to employees, you're talking to them on an individual basis to fully understand what motivates them. Because what motivates Tanya over here isn't going to be the same thing that motivates Chris over here. So you need to be able to match their growth need to what you're offering as an organization. And if you don't, it goes back to the title of this highlight, they're going to have a motivation to change jobs, and you're going to have higher attrition. And then that's going to cost a lot of money. And then you're going to have to go through it again. So that's number 2 on motivations for change. The last percentage that they talk about in this highlight is 12% aim to escape negative company culture. Now, just because this is the lowest statistic in the out of the 3, it doesn't mean that it's the least important. In fact, it's probably the most important, because if we think about this, if you have a negative company culture, what's likely to happen? There's going to be limited career progression because most people are going to leave. The employees that are coming in are going to see that, and they're going to interpret that as there's no real room for growth because the people at the top are already at the top and there's not going to be any movement around there. And they don't want people to compete with them. So I'll do what I got to do for a little bit until I find another job. So just keep that in mind, right? So that negative company culture can interact with career progression or lack thereof. And then same thing whenever it says seek new opportunities to learn new technologies. If your company is not innovative or they're not moving with the times, then that could be based off of a stagnant or outdated culture, right? Because most of the time, if you have a positive culture, you allow people to take risk without being reprimanded. They need to learn from the risk if they fail, but they're allowed to take that risk. They're allowed to speak up. They're allowed to say the things that need to be said without the reprimand or the punishment that happens or the consequence that happens with it. Now, I'm not saying that they directly tied these two together, but it's important to know that company culture is more at play in a lot of these negative things than most would want to admit. And so if you're trying to build a culture and you're not doing it intentionally or on purpose, you're going to have more of an opportunity for people to leave instead of stay and grow with the organization. Again, Ryan McCohen here is quoted in the article saying dramatic changes in the tech labor market during the past 2 years have given workers whiplash in terms of available job opportunities and rewards. So it's quite natural to see this level of angst. And so what he's calling out here is a different interpretation of what I was saying before. And he's saying that, okay, the tech industry has seen a big shift. And there's a couple of factors that come into play here. One is the increase of AI technology coming in. So you can be more efficient and effective with less people now. And so a lot of these big tech organizations are being able to factor in AI and skim out some of the fat, so to speak, in their organization. And as a result, these tech workers are not needed as much. And I don't know the stat, but I'm assuming that a lot of the entry level positions are going to be hit the hardest here. Again, that's my opinion or my assumption here. So if you know if that's true or false, let us know in the comments so people can get the accurate interpretation. But that's very true, right? And so knowing that the possibility of a layoff is happening more often than normal, what's the reason for them to stay? And to us, it goes back to culture, right? There's a lot involved, but it kind of goes back to culture. And so that's highlight number 2. Let's go ahead and dive into highlight number 3, which is priorities in a new job. So career growth is the top priority for 21% of North American tech workers considering a job change, followed by 18% seeking a flexible schedule, and then 16% searching for a better salary. So again, it goes back to career growth. So if you are not taking into consideration and being intentional with how you treat your employees, and I don't just mean in this case from a cultural basis, but in the sense of actual growth. And again, you have to talk to your employees individually. You talk to them together too, but individually, you're gonna fully understand what your employee is really looking for in terms of growth, because growth can mean a lot of different things. It can mean job enrichment. Do they want to take on more work but stay in that same position? Not everybody wants to be a manager or a leader, right? So find out what growth looks like to them, and then have that career development plan. And whenever you're meeting with your employees in your one-on-ones, have these discussions. If you don't have it every single time, at least have it monthly. And I know that I worked for a company that had a great company culture, and they built in a initiative for a career development program. And as a person on the leadership team, I was a part of that too. And so we actually took where our employees were and figured out where they wanted to go. And going from A to B, we coached them and ensured that they had different projects or tasks or responsibilities that helped them grow a little bit more into what they were trying to get promoted to, right? So that career growth has to be at the forefront, especially for Gen Zers, especially for younger millennials, because that is what they're looking for. And we've heard a lot of the lingo and the speeches from Simon Sinek and other leadership experts, where somebody will get into an organization and work there for 6 months and wonder why they haven't been promoted yet. But if we want to overcome that challenge, let's show them what progression actually looks like, right? I think that's a big issue, is that communication and transparency and clarity around what is the company's expectation and what is the employee's expectation, and how can we meet in the middle so we're both satisfied and then get the promotion, right? And then we talked about 18% seeking a flexible schedule. What is the reason behind that? Is driving. It's a driving force from the way that the world of work is shifting. And we see that most people who have a flexible schedule have a better work-life balance, which also correlates into a better well-being. And actually, it helps with better productivity because they actually are getting the rest that they need, the recuperation that they need, right? The rejuvenation. And so that's what we got to think about here. And then 16% searching for a better salary. Again, to me, this is where it goes back to culture, because we know that people are willing to shave off a little bit of the salary if they are part of a good culture, if they are able to connect with colleagues and feel like they belong. That's where Grapevine comes in, especially for remote and hybrid organizations, right? We're providing the home that your remote and hybrid team needs to stay connected, informed, and engaged from anywhere in the world, right? It's a little bit easier in the office, but with our software, you can make it easier than ever in a remote environment. And the reason that I'm talking about culture whenever we're talking about better salary is because in my experience, you don't actually leave because you want a better salary. You leave because there's nothing keeping you at that company, right? So the culture isn't hitting it. The salary is okay, but you would leave for a little bit more. The manager is not giving you enough tension or support, right? They might not be hearing you. So there's a lot of factors that go into just reading better salary at the surface level, in our opinion, and based off of research and studies that we've read and conducted ourselves. So that's something to think about. If you are doing exit interviews and somebody says that they're leaving for a better salary, just know that there's a lot of variables that go into that better salary conversation. Okay. And then another quote here before we go into highlight number 4 is, to create a successful workforce strategy, leaders should listen to and understand what in-demand workers in AI, cloud, and cybersecurity fields desire and expect in their jobs. And I think that the reason that they're calling out these specific areas is because those are the specific people and the industry trends that we're seeing at a high trajectory. So obviously AI is taking the world by storm. With that, we're going to need higher security. So cybersecurity is there. And then we're also going to have to continue to build out the cloud, because there's going to be more and more people developing their own tools that clutters the cloud. So you want to make sure that you have a successful workforce strategy there. All right, let's go ahead and move on to highlight number 4, which is challenges in hiring top talent. So 95% of tech leaders surveyed recently report facing challenges with hiring top talent. Another quote here, and then we'll talk about our insights, is, despite the high demand for tech talent, many tech leaders report challenges in hiring top talent. So here is, we want to make sure, because we don't know, right? I think this article is covering a lot. And so it doesn't necessarily say, are these tech leaders in office, hybrid, or remote? And the reason that I'm bringing that up is, if they're in office, then they're only searching about a 50-mile radius, unless somebody is willing to move, which in this day and time is rare unless they already want to move into that city. So if you're only doing in office, you're already cutting the talent pool down by a lot. Now, if you're hybrid, you can get a little bit innovative with that. So you might have somebody who's fully remote, and then other people who are hybrid in office, and then we're working from anywhere on a different basis. So what I would like to see is, who are these tech leaders? What is their work from home scheme, work from anywhere scheme, or in the office scheme? Because that's going to be a lot different. But I think the underlining thing here is kind of something that we've already talked about, which is tech is doing a lot of layoffs. And so maybe, and we saw earlier that a lot of people are willing to shift into a different opportunity. And that opportunity could be a different industry, it could be a different position, whatever the case is. What I'm wondering is, are the tech people who were in the big tech industry or just tech in general, so software as a service, that type of stuff, are they navigating over to health tech, gov tech, fintech, like places that are a little bit more secure, but they're still able to do technological stuff in an innovative way, right? So if that's the case, we got to get people back by somehow finding that stability again. And to us, even if you can't be stable or promise or guarantee stability for your employees, you can be transparent, right? And so when you see some rough waters coming up, don't hold that in. Now, if you're a public company, you might have to do certain things a certain way, but if you're not, you can tell your employees as developments are happening. And yes, they might choose to leave on their own, but it's the moral thing to do. It's easier said than done, but that's something that you want to think about, right? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to highlight number 5, so then we can jump into the second article, and we'll try to go through that one a little bit faster. But the last one is important. It's all of these are important, but this is important as well. So addressing diversity and inclusion. So Black tech workers are less likely to receive promotions or career advancement opportunities, even with similar experience levels. And so the quote that we pulled out from the article here says, leaders can deploy a layered strategy to both fill skills gaps and foster an inclusive culture by offering mentorship and sponsorship programs, training, and employee resource groups. So basically what they're saying here is the first call out, which is the problem, that Black tech workers are less likely to receive promotions or career advancement. What is the reason behind that? And a lot of it is that we're choosing to hire people based off of our bias. So if I was a hiring manager, which I am, and I'm not consciously reminding myself to make sure that we see the full scope of what it is that we're hiring for, and don't just hire people that look like me, that sound like me, that have the same background as me, but bring in people who have the experience and they have a diverse background, or they have a different background than me, so we can continue to get better and better and better, right? And I mean, Google has done a study. Laszlo Bock led it whenever he was VP of people operations at Google. And he showed the people that there is a unconscious or subconscious bias within seconds of seeing a resume. And there was a difference between seeing a quote unquote typical white name on a resume versus quote unquote a Black name or an ethnic name on a resume. It had nothing to do with their skills. It had nothing to do with their education. It had nothing to do with their experience. It was all because we were able to connect with something that was familiar to us. And one of the best ways to overcome bias is to have a more diverse surrounding, right? It's kind of funny in a sense, because Grapevine, I am probably the only white person right now. We have Pakistanis, and then we have Indian heritage. And so I think that's pretty cool, right? Because now I get to see different cultures, I get to understand them better, and hopefully, as a result of that, we can make better decisions based off of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, whether that's hiring, whether that's promoting, whether that's development, whatever the case is. We have a more diverse approach. And I don't care what people say about DE&I being woke. That is not the point of DE&I. DE&I, and the point of that is to make sure that we don't continue to only hire people that look like us, that sound like us, right? That is the big difference. And the reason that we're so bullish on flexible, remote, and hybrid work is because if we look at the stats, it helps so many more people have the opportunity to do things that they might not have been able to do easily in an in-office environment. We know that working moms often, once they have the child, they stay at home, and then there's a gap in their resume, which makes it a little bit harder to get back to work. But by working remotely or offering flexible work, it allows the mother to get back into the office or the back into work a little bit sooner, right? And we also know that with disabled people, being able to work in the comfort of your home in the way that you have it set up for you, instead of having to go into the office and always be worried, is this ramp going to be open? Is there going to be an elevator? Is there going to be all these different things? Are people going to look at me differently? Just think about all those things that it helps. And then we've seen Black workers have less microaggressions whenever they're working remotely, right? So there's benefits. And whenever it comes to remote work, if you're intentional, it's okay to be remote and still give people promotions. There's headlines out there that say remote workers don't get as many promotions, but it's because the company hasn't been intentional. It's not intentional in their infrastructure, intentional in their operational structure, intentional in how they interact and work with remote workers or hybrid workers. It's not the employee. It's not because they're working remotely. It's because the company has not set up their organization in the way that they need to be able to see the work that people are doing and reward them for that. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive into the next article. And I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. I've been waiting for it. And we're going to go ahead and dive into the second article, which is from Fast Company. It was also published Monday, the 13th, 2024. And the article title is Hybrid Work Needs a Performance Review. Now, obviously, we love performance here at Grapevine. It's something that I used to focus on in my last company, and we have plans in the future to bring that into Grapevine, but we have to start somewhere. So let's go ahead and dive into highlight number one. I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker because it's already a little bit of a longer video. And so highlight number one is the rise of hybrid work. Globally, as of 2023, 6 in 10 full-time employees want flexible work. And in Europe, 66% believe work from home should be a legal right. That kind of goes back to what we were saying about DE&I and being able to have these certain things that really level the playing field versus the traditional playing field that we played on for so long. And so the quote that we took away here is flexible working came into our lives with such force primarily due to imposed health requirements. Now, what they're talking about is obviously COVID-19, the pandemic really shifted us into remote work. But as a result, once things started to lift up, we started to really experience that work-life balance and being able to balance the difference of working when we need to work versus being in the office and taking time away from different things, right? Which I think is a good thing because now we're focused on outcomes instead of butts and seats. So let's go ahead and continue. The challenges of maintaining balance. Now, this is something that whenever we did our product validation and we talked to a lot of remote workers, a lot of remote leaders, this was something that came up a lot. Burnout is becoming more prevalent, with 77% of workers experiencing burnout at their current job and over 50% citing more than one occurrence. The delineation of work and home became blended, compounding the pressure. Now, this is important because with us working from home, now, luckily, I'm able to have my own office in our house, and it is my workplace, right? So I go in here, I can shut the door, I can do whatever I need to, but at times I still work from the loft on the couch. I work downstairs in the kitchen and all that kind of stuff. And so what that does is it blends your workspace with your living space. And so it's easy to receive an email or a Slack message and start to respond. But there are ways around this, and it's providing structure in how you operate. This is where a remote work policy would come into play. And there's a simple thing that you can do within that remote work policy. And you don't just write it, you share it, and then you continue to push people and encourage them to follow these two lines. So one is, yes, we work remotely. This could go into your remote work policy. Yes, we work remotely, but we want to make sure that you are able to sign off when it makes sense for you. So let's say that operating hours for you, I'm in the EST, Eastern Standard Time. So let's say the operating hours for me is 9 to 5. Let's just use those because everybody's used to that. The operating hours is 9 to 5. Anything outside of your time zone operating hours, you are not expected to respond until the next day, right? And what that does is that it's kind of like whenever we were in COVID and people were like, are we going back to the office? Are we staying remote? Or I don't know, what's the deal here? And whenever certain organizations took the leap and said, you know what, we can, and we're going to go 100% remote, that allowed people to focus on work instead of worrying about, am I going to have to commute again? Am I going to have to go here and maybe catch COVID and all those types of things? It's the same thing here. If you clearly communicate in your remote work policy and then you continue to reinforce that and encourage people to do it, over time, you're going to start seeing that, okay, burnout is going to be a little bit lower because people are going to start to abide by that rule where 9 to 5, okay, I'm expected to respond and I will, and blah, blah, blah. Another way that you could go about this is instead of a 9 to 5 operation, it could be you have a 24-hour response rate or a 12-hour response rate. So if I reach out to you in an email or a Figgy chat in Grapevine, or I post something and you're tagged in it, then you have 12 hours to respond. If not, just let us know why, right? It depends on your culture. It depends on what you're trying to do, but that's how you can overcome the challenges of maintaining that balance. Now, one more thing in Grapevine is that we have an out of office option. And that out of office doesn't have to be PTO or holiday or vacation or anything like that. It can be simply that you're signing off for the day. And it's just a very simple thing. It says out of office, yes or no. If you're out of office, you click yes, and there's a little dot around your profile image, and it will be gray. If you're out of office and you say no, then it will be green, and people know that you're in the office. And so now whenever they send you a message or they reach out to you, they understand, okay, whenever he gets back online, he'll respond to me, right? So there's different ways to go about this. And this is where having a platform that is specifically built for remote and hybrid organizations is more beneficial than other tools that are out there. Okay, let's go ahead and go to highlight number 3, which is impact on professional development. I got something to say about this, but let's go ahead and look at the stat first. So negative mentions of remote work in intern reviews grew by 548% between 2019 and 2021, indicating a negative impact on learning, development, and socialization for younger workers. I think this is where a lot of people are saying, oh, well, if you're remote, you're really missing out on an opportunity to understand from mentorship and learning and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, what stands out to you in this statistic? The part that stands out to me is the 2019 to 2021. To me, what that says is, hey, something happened here and we all were forced to go work remotely, right? So it's kind of weird that they chose this time frame to do this statistic, but of course, we weren't prepared for what was happening. We didn't have, this is the part that really irks me, which is if we got to go back in the office because learning development and socialization are so important. We got to have the water cooler talk because that's where innovation happens and blah, blah, blah. But in reality, no, we've had hundreds of years to identify and describe and define what the traditional in office approach looks like. And you're saying from 2019 and 2021, where we went from 26% of the world working kind of remotely to 41%, we weren't prepared for that. Well, no shit. And so what we have to do whenever we're seeing these statistics, we have to be careful and we have to understand what was going on. Now we've had the time. It's 2024, meaning that we've had 3 years since the pandemic, right? And so what we've seen is companies like Grapevine being built specifically for remote and hybrid organizations to be able to replace the need for a physical office. That's exactly what we're doing. We're giving your organization a home where that used to be the office. And guess what? Now you can have a better way of providing learning and development, socialization for younger workers. I know I've said this 1,000 times in this episode already, but it's all about intentionality. If your organization is not being intentional in how they treat, manage, onboard, train, enable, and connect employees, then they are not doing hybrid correctly, right? And so this kind of segues into highlight number 4, which is addressing the downside of hybrid work, right? And I wanted to throw this in here, both of these last, or the one before and this one, because we don't want to necessarily be biased on remote or hybrid work, but we understand also how to analyze data. And if you're talking about 2019 and 2021, then you're skewing it already. So, okay, let's look at highlight number 4, addressing the downside of hybrid work. 81% of hybrid workers experience burnout, showcasing the toll of constantly being on and struggling to establish routines. For as long as we have our skills shortage, the delicate employer push and hold on. For as long as we have our skills shortage, the delicate employer push and pull will be forever skewed. So we've already talked about the burnout, but let's talk about what they're talking about here. They're talking about the skill shortage. And what that means is if you don't have the right people or enough people, more so in this quote, then yes, there's going to be a lot that falls on one person, that falls on a team, that falls on the entire team. And so there's going to be that employer push saying, hey, we need to do this and we don't have anybody else right now. You pick it up. And so you feel like you can't turn off, especially in a remote and hybrid environment. That's where that remote work policy comes into play. That's where transparency comes into play. That's where setting expectations for your employees comes into play. Because there's a difference in asking someone to work over for a select period of time because we have to push this code out, or we have to get this out to the hands of the customers, or there's a bug that needs to be fixed right away. There's a difference than for asking your employees to do that versus taking a step back and saying, okay, there's not really a deadline. This is important, but it's not urgent. So work until you can, and then come back in the next morning and do it. You know, it's just all about that transparency and communication. All right. I'm going to wrap up with highlight number 5, and then we'll go ahead and call it quits. This episode was a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I had it recorded before and the microphone wasn't working, so this is what you get. Highlight number 5 is navigating the future of work. A successful hybrid model must deliver organizational benefits requiring pushback and occasional restraint. The best model, which differs from industry, company, and region, requires strong leadership, patience, and trust authentic employee relationships, and transparency and unified communication. So what they're basically saying here is what we've been saying throughout the entire episode, which is you have to have a structure in the way that you work. And so that should include, in some form or fashion, how you communicate and you collaborate. And then how do you connect from different locations, different time zones, a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous methodologies and frameworks, clear communication charters to help people understand where do we go to distribute this information? Where do we go to announce an emergency? Where do we XYZ, right? Remote work policy. What are the must haves or the must do's versus what do we have the right to do as employees in this organization, and clearly identify that, and then be transparent whenever it comes to these types of things. But honestly, it's just having that structure, that infrastructure through tools like Grapevine with a mixture of other tools that you need, like collaboration tools like Salesforce, Zendesk, whatever the case is, Jira, whatever the case is. You want to make sure that you're providing your employees with the right resources so they can be as successful as possible. And that is how you navigate the future of work properly. So I hope that I didn't go on too many tangents, and I hope that it was all kind of relative. But let us know what you thought about in the comments, and let us know if anything stood out that we should dive in a little bit deeper on, or if you'd like to come on the Future of Work Weekly Report or our Untangled Vines podcast, Redefining the Rules of Work, reach out to us. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and be sure to share this with any Future of Work pioneers that you have out there that might be interested in this series. We drop every single Wednesday as long as we have time, and we've only missed one so far. So like, subscribe, comment, and share with a friend who is looking to stay ahead on the future of work. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.